I'm paranoid that it's not in focus. Some excellent behind the scenes content here. Hello! I turned the camera on today because I put makeup on. And that's what happened. So things in Italy are a little bit strange. There's been some contradictory information delivered by our government about whether or not we can run classes, which is always very fun. And that's a lot of stress and anxiety that I'm going to ignore by talking to a camera for a bit about living in different countries because someone asked for it and I need to procrastinate and not think about that for a little bit. So hey, how's it going? Hope you're doing better. Hey. In case you were not aware, I grew up in Hong Kong. I moved to London for university, refused to go back to Hong Kong after university, lived in London for about 9 years, moved to Madrid for 1 year, moved to Italy 2 months ago. At some point in that time, I also lived in Amsterdam for about 3 months. So let's talk about the different cities, what it was like to live there, what I like, what I don't like. Of course, personal opinion time. So pinches of salt, please and thank you, kosher salt. Like your Molly Baz salt and pasta water. I love Hong Kong. I think Hong Kong is an amazing city to live. The street food is the best I've ever had in my life, except maybe Singapore. But like in terms of places I've lived, if you want like a little something to chew on while you're like going about your day, Hong Kong is the best place. You have siu mai on the streets, you got egg ball waffles, you got bubble tea places, left, right, and center. The food in Hong Kong, easily the best. I'm sorry. Other countries can suck it. Hong Kong's where it's at. In terms of getting around the city, this is something that's really important to me. As somebody who doesn't like driving, I am a super big believer in not needing to drive a car, using public transport or cycling to get around. So this is a huge factor for me when it comes to living in new cities. Cities should have good infrastructure for this. Hong Kong totally does. Really excellent public transport system, very, very frequent trains and buses. It's relatively affordable. A+, I super like it. It's also really easy to use. You have like a little contactless card called an octopus card that you can use on everything. And you can also pay for food and shopping with it as well. So it's like a useful debit card alternative. So this is super useful for me like when I was a kid in Hong Kong, like when I was young and didn't have any white hairs and was innocent to the world and the traumas of pandemic. Actually, that's not true because we had a pandemic in Hong Kong when I was 11. Oh yeah, in case you didn't know that, we had a SARS outbreak in Hong Kong when I was maybe 10, actually. I was still in primary school. Schools closed down. It was like a whole thing. It's why Hong Kong's really good at dealing with pandemics because we have already done it. Anyway, let's stop talking about pandemics. Hong Kong public transport system, super great. Terrible for cycling. If you wanted to get around by cycling, not a good city. Not that many people do it and it's kind of mountainous. Like there's some ups and downs, which makes cycling not super fun in Hong Kong. I also don't think there's very good cycling infrastructure there because the public transportation system is banging, so you don't need to ride a bike because you can get everywhere by bus, tram, or by MTR, and it's great. So yeah, Hong Kong is also super multicultural. My father has been living in Hong Kong now for upwards of, I'm gonna say like 40 years, and he just still does not speak a lick of Cantonese. And he still completely manages his life totally fine. So if you wanted to go to Hong Kong, it'd be great if you learned Cantonese. Cantonese is hella hard to learn, but if you didn't want to learn it, you wouldn't die, you'd be fine. There is a little bit of like an expat bubble and like local population separation, but I think that happens anywhere in the world you go, and I don't think Hong Kong is significantly worse for that than other places. Negatives about Hong Kong. This is gonna be really hard for me to talk about in an unbiased way because I grew up there. I have like family history there, and like, you know, family is always a complicated topic for anybody. So if you are not me and you're interested in like potentially living in Hong Kong one day, property prices are really, really, really high. It's really expensive to actually get a place of a decent size. So if you're particularly from the US or the UK where you're used to having like a little bit of outside space or you're used to having a big space, you're kind of screwed. There's not a lot of that. Everyone lives in relatively small apartments and they're relatively expensive. There's also not a huge amount of green space either. So that is important to you. Yeah, no, not the place for you. But there are pockets of green. There's lots of like national park kind of things, which we go to. There's also some great beaches that is kind of polluted. Hong Kong's also kind of polluted. But you know, it's a massive city on a tiny island. What did you expect? London. I really like London. I think it's a super lovely city. The public transportation system is really solid as well, just like Hong Kong, something you'd expect in a bigger city. London does get cold, and also London does not know how to deal with snow. As a country where it snows relatively regularly, you would think as a like nation or as like a city, they would be like, hey, snow is something that happens all the time here. maybe we should be ready for it and like be prepared. But no, every time it snows there, everyone loses their damn minds, and then half the public transportation shuts down, and I got snowed into the airport once. It was like this much snow. It was like Canada would have laughed at us. Like the whole nation of Canada was laughing at us. One of the biggest downfalls for me for London is that it's really, really, really expensive. It's why I do not live there anymore. I left London. My quality of life stayed pretty much the same, but my expenses dropped by like 1/3. Oh my God, that is an expensive city to live. Like you need to be earning a decent income to feel comfortable and go out and be sociable. And I was a full-time dancer and I was not comfortable. London also has really good food. This is something that I feel like is underappreciated. The English stereotype about food is pretty terrible, but London has a really good mixing pot. Again, like Hong Kong, very multicultural, a lot of mixing pots, which means lots of people from their countries come and open up restaurants, and the food is amazing. The Indian food, amazing. I've had some of the best Chinese food I've ever had in Europe, in London. If you need a recommendation for some good Chinese places in London, I can recommend 2 places in particular. Xiangbiangbiang on Wentworth Street, some excellent hand-pulled noodles. I love it. I used to go there all the time. Second place, Joy King Lau in Chinatown has really, really, really good dim sum. Even my mom approved of it, and she's been living in Hong Kong for like 30 years. So highly recommend those 2 places. They were where I went on the regular basis when I lived in London. Also, anywhere on Brick Lane for Indian food, also Brick Lane bagels. Oh man, I do miss London. Food is another very important thing for me. Cycling in London was terrifying. I couldn't tell if it was terrifying because I wasn't a very good cyclist. Still not a very good cyclist, but it was terrifying and I didn't like it, didn't enjoy it. I found London drivers were a lot more angry, so I didn't enjoy cycling in London. I do know people who do enjoy cycling in London. I am not one of those people. On the scale of would Katie move back to London, the answer is probably no, just because I cannot afford London at the moment. But I have a lot of really good friends there and I really do miss it, and I miss seeing all those lovely people. But until London decides to get a lot more affordable or I suddenly earn a lot more money, that is not gonna be a thing. I'm gonna be real, Amsterdam, I only was there for like 3-4 months. I didn't really get a great feel for the place. I was also being hosted. I don't know if I can say I lived in Amsterdam. I feel like I was there for 4 months. I should be able to say I lived there, but I also feel like I was being hosted and looked after a lot. So cycling Amsterdam, easiest thing in the world. Amsterdam was built for bikes and I love it so much. No one drives cars. Oh, there's so many cycle paths. You feel really, really safe. A+ city for getting around via bike. Did you know that Amsterdam has free ferry services that you can literally cycle onto? Dotted around the city are piers. Literally cycle onto a boat, and the boat will take you from one pier to another, across the river or down the river, and it's really fun and it's a little bit faster and it's just, ooh, it's great. Dutch chocolate is amazing. Tony's Chocolonis is still one of my favorite brands of chocolate in the world. Amsterdam, very good for vegetarians. Amsterdam has a very like woke liberal culture. Everywhere has vegetarian options. In terms of fast food or like quick little bites to eat in the Netherlands, they have these shops that sell small things of deep fried deliciousness. My favorite ones are the cheesy ones, which are called kaza something, and then bitterballen, which are like deep fried balls of bechamel with normally beef, but you can only find a vegetarian version as well because hey, guess what? Vegetarian. And bitterballen with mustard, ooh, yes, delicious, so much fun. I love it so much. They're not super healthy, but they are really delicious. You can also get fries pretty much everywhere, and Dutch mayonnaise is just better than all other mayonnaises. I'm sorry, Japan. I'm sorry, America. Your mayonnaise ain't got nothing on Dutch mayonnaise. I would say Amsterdam was probably slightly less multicultural than London. However, people still spoke really, really great English pretty much everywhere I went, which made it very easy for me to make friends and talk to people and integrate myself into society. And people didn't think I was weird. I mean, aside from the obvious facts that I am weird, but no one thought I was weird for being like unable to speak Dutch. Like that was quite okay, and people were very happy to speak English. I also love Dutch people. Dutch communication is very direct in a way that makes me feel British sometimes. I am technically British. My passport is British, my father is British, I spent 9 years in London. I don't always act particularly British, and my accent definitely is not British. But there are some moments in the Netherlands where I felt very British. British people, generally speaking, don't have direct communication. They'll talk around a subject. So if you ask a British person, how are you feeling today? You're probably gonna get a generic answer that has no meaning. This is not a good example. I couldn't think of anything better. If you were to ask a Dutch person how they're feeling, you're much, much more likely to get an actual genuine answer from them. And sometimes it's really surprising. In a British context, you're making small talk. You're not actually talking about anything of importance. I was saying it like this, like talking around the subject, because I had a moment of being British, and they're talking directly to the point. And I got used to it and I love it. I think it's great. Everyone should communicate like this. It makes life so much easier. Tell me what you want, tell me what you need all the time, please. Thank you. The final question to ask about Amsterdam is, would I go back there? If I was offered another job with Algorithm, the school I worked for there, and I could have that same setup that I had when I was working there, totally yes, 100%, because they helped me with my accommodation and that kind of stuff, because like London, Amsterdam is pretty expensive. So I would not have been able to live there if it wasn't for the support of the school. Madrid, we're like swiping through these countries right now. I was in Madrid for about a year. 5 months of that was in lockdown, so I don't know if that counts as being in Madrid versus just being in a small flat. I have such a soft spot for Madrid, and I can't tell if it's just because I had a great time there with amazing people. In terms of getting around, if you live in the center, probably walk everywhere you need to be. You shouldn't need to take too much public transport. However, getting a place in the center for a reasonable amount of money is unreasonable. So in order to be able to live somewhere within walking distance, you're probably gonna have to pay quite a lot for it, and it's gonna be a relatively small space. If you move further out, it'll be bigger. I think this is true for most cities, but I felt it very strongly in Madrid, particularly because a lot of the places in the center have been taken by Airbnbs now. I was part of the problem. I lived in an Airbnb while I was there. Yay! Part of the problem. But once you're in the center, you can get around very easily. Everything is walkable. It's not a very cycle-friendly city because it is super hilly, mountainous, ups and downs. I would not navigate on a bike there. I didn't even look into getting a bike there. I just walked everywhere I went. The food in Madrid is also very good. It's also very meat focused. So if you're a vegetarian, you're going to struggle just a little bit. But if you like meat, there's some really amazing meat places and lots of really nice hams and pork and stuff. And I was told it was very good. Final question for Madrid, would I go back there? Yes, in a heartbeat, 100%. I don't know if I have a job in Madrid, and that's really like the thing that would bring me anywhere is could I work there? But as a city to live, I super loved it. I really liked everybody. All the people in Madrid are wonderful and warm and friendly. I liked learning Spanish. Forgotten most of my Spanish now because I'm trying to learn Italian. Would go back to Madrid if could. No idea, Brexit. I've been in Torino now for about 3 months. So far, I super like the city. It's beautiful. I can cycle everywhere, which I really enjoy. The infrastructure for cycling here isn't as good as Amsterdam, but it's good enough where I'm very comfortable cycling pretty much everywhere. And the rules for cycling seem a little bit more chill here versus in London and Amsterdam, it was very strict. Like, this is a cycle path, this is pedestrian, do not. Italians have a little bit more of a laissez-faire approach to these kind of things. So like if I'm cycling down a one-way road the wrong way, I don't feel that bad about it. And I know like this is a much faster route. I'm gonna turn off in a second. And so I just do it. Obviously the food here is incredible. Like I cannot get enough. I eat so much here. It's going to be a problem. But luckily I cycle a lot and dance a lot right now. So hopefully it's not gonna be too much of a problem. But delicious, super happy. The chocolate, the hazelnuts, the pistachios. Oh, yes, I'm very happy eating here. The food here, super great. It is less multicultural than the other places I've mentioned so far. I think Turin itself, maybe Rome is slightly more international or more multicultural. Because both Fiat and Ferrero are based in Turin, you do have a lot of people from all over the country coming here for work. However, you don't have a huge amount of people from other places in the world. Like, I haven't met so many people who are not from Italy. However, my social circle is very limited right now because coronavirus. So maybe I'm wrong on that. It's only been 3 months and I've been in semi-lockdown the entire time. So, hey. So far everything has been relatively affordable and nothing has been crazy expensive. It's not like London or Amsterdam. The only downside so far to living in Italy is that, have you ever had this where you've gone back and watched a movie from like the 80s or like you've rewatched Friends and you're just like, oh, this is slightly problematic because we don't think this way anymore, or like this is like a little bit of an old-fashioned value. I feel like that is what it's like living in Italy if you're like an aggressively woke, feminist, anti-racist, crazy person like I am. It's not like people are malicious or mean or actively cruel. It's just there's a couple moments where people say stuff where I'm just like, oh, whoa. And that's just a little like struggle bus that I'm on, but I'm working on it. I'm educating my friends and shutting down people who say sexist shit. Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily demonstrative of the entire culture or the entire universe of my experience here. It's just something that I have noticed that as someone who is like super aggressively woke is a thing that I have noticed. Compared to like Amsterdam, which is super on it when it comes to this kind of stuff, I think that this is like one of the biggest contrasts I found between my personal core values and the core values of the culture that I'm living in. Which is super interesting. I wonder how it would be if I moved back to Hong Kong, because I think Hong Kong probably has very similar core values to here, but I haven't lived there for 10 years. So I don't know anymore. This is a list of my observations. It was mostly about food and whether or not I don't need a car, because I'm gonna be real with you guys. That's my priority list. Is food good? Can I get around without needing to drive? Because I do not want to drive. And then used to be, my previous criteria used to be, is the airport accessible / does it fly to many places because I need to travel for work? But hey, guess what? That's not a problem I have anymore, woohoo, because COVID-19. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. This was very fun for me to make. I just enjoy talking to cameras, and also I think I talked really fast in this video, so congratulations if you understood me. I normally speak very slowly nowadays because I'm surrounded by non-native speakers. So when I'm alone in my room talking to a camera, I just go full speed, and it's terrible. It's the only time I can do it. Anyways, I'm gonna go edit this now. Bye!